This video is sponsored by Aura. If you've ever experienced identity theft, think about what happened and how it impacted you. What did you learn from the experience, and what steps did you take to recover? Sharing your story can help others understand the importance of protecting their identity and inspire them to take action with Aura and their different features to avoid a similar situation. Data broker opt-out, identity theft protection, financial fraud protection, certified data security and privacy, VPN, antivirus, password manager, and 24/7 US-based support. Don't leave yourself open to hackers and scammers. Go to aura.com/KrystlynCrime to get your 14-day free trial. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video. On Thursday, August 14th, 1913, two Croatian-American miners on strike, Ivan Kalin and Ivan Stimac, traveled to South Range, Michigan with a group of fellow strikers to collect strike benefits. Upon arrival, they discovered that the Western Federation of Miners was unable to provide funds due to the scale of the strike. After stopping for a drink, the two men began their journey back to their boarding house in Seaborville. As they passed through Painesdale, Kalin and Stimac briefly separated from their group to purchase soda pop at a local store. Once finished, they continued their trek, taking a shortcut across mining company property. During this final leg of their journey, they were confronted by Humphrey Quick, a trammer boss assigned to patrol the property by his supervisor, William H. Schatz. Quick shouted at them, warning they were not permitted to use the path. However, Kalin and Stimac, limited in their English proficiency, did not fully understand the warning. Kalin, speaking in broken English, explained they had always used the path before. Frustrated, Quick brandished a billy club, threatening them if they did not comply. Despite his threats, the two men continued walking. Quick later claimed that Kalin turned back and shook his fist, shouting, "You better watch out, you son of a bit. I fixed you for sure," as they walked away. By then, Kalin and Stimac were about 100 feet away and soon disappeared towards Seaborville. Quick reported the incident to his supervisor, Satch, while en route encountering Thomas Raleigh, a violent strikebreaker. Excited by Quick's story, Raleigh urged him to seek Satch's permission to confront the miners. Upon hearing Quick's account, Satch recognized the situation as a potential misunderstanding due to the language barrier. He instructed Quick and Raleigh to retrieve Kalin and Stimac, emphasizing, "Bring them down here, and I'll talk to them." Quick and Raleigh set off for Seaborville, joined along the way by several others, including deputized strikebreakers from the Waddell Mahone Agency and local non-striking residents. When the mob arrived at the boarding house, Thomas Raleigh asked Humphrey Quick to identify Ivan Kalin. Quick spotted Kalin, standing near a group of men playing a lawn bowling game in the side yard of the Putrich boarding house. Kalin, who had just finished dinner, was outside chewing tobacco and was not participating in the game. Several neighbors were also present. Raleigh shouted at Kalin, "I want you," to which Kalin replied, "No, you can't take me." The strikebreakers, armed with billy clubs, began assaulting Kalin and others nearby. Kalin managed to escape into the boarding house, while his companion, Ivan Stimac, remained inside, finishing his supper. Amid the chaos, Harry James climbed over the fence as the violence unfolded. The landlord, Joseph Putrich, tried to de-escalate the situation, telling the armed men, "I don't want any trouble around my house." During the commotion, Stephen Putrich, Joseph's brother, came outside. A thrown object, which missed its target, startled one of the armed men, Cooper, who was already holding a firearm. Isolated and outnumbered in the yard, while the other gunmen stood outside the fence, Cooper panicked when a stick struck his head. In his fear, he fired his gun at the first person he saw, fatally shooting Stephen Putrich in the abdomen. Stephen had no connection to the earlier incident on the trail, but became an unintended victim. The other gunmen reacted by rushing back into the yard, surrounding the boarding house, and firing their weapons indiscriminately into it. Inside, Joseph Putrich's wife, Antonia, grabbed their 7-month-old daughter and fled through the kitchen, narrowly avoiding gunfire. As she leapt from a shed to escape, the baby's face was burned by powder from a close-range gunshot. Meanwhile, her 3- and 4-year-old children remained trapped in the dining room. Cooper pursued Kalin into the house, firing as he went. The hired girl, Josephine Grubtick, abandoned her dishwashing and ran through the smoke-filled house to the master bedroom. Amid the gunfire, boarder Albert Tejan witnessed the chaos. He saw men with guns at the windows, and Josephine fleeing with the children. Upstairs, Albert encountered his 18-year-old brother Alois, who collapsed in his arms, saying, "Brother, they killed me." Alois had been shot in the side and soon died. Elsewhere in the house, Stanko Stepik lay at the bottom of a staircase, mortally wounded. Shot in the arm and back, he attempted to climb the stairs on his hands and knees, but collapsed. Stephen Putrich, bleeding from his stomach wound, cried out to his brother, Joseph, who rushed to call a doctor. Despite his efforts, Stephen succumbed to his injuries the following day at the Mine Hospital in Tri-Mountain. His death certificate uniquely recorded the cause as homicidal, a rare designation during the 1913 strike violence. As the shooting subsided, Ivan Stymak fled from the boarding house, injured by a gunshot to his side. He stumbled over Stipich's body and witnessed the dying Tejan brothers before grabbing his coat and escaping into the woods. He hid until nightfall and sought refuge with a friend, Frank Stiglich. The doctor who arrived later found little he could do. Aloy Tejan was beyond saving, and Stephen Putrich's injuries were too severe for treatment at his house. Though rushed to the hospital, Stephen passed away the next day. The violence at Seaborville became another tragic episode in the 1913 miners' strike, underscoring the brutal conflicts and losses endured by the strikers and their families. Once the group ran out of ammunition, they began altering the crime scene to fabricate evidence suggesting the conflict had been two-sided. According to Stephen Leto, after the gunmen who had fired their guns ran out of ammunition, they paused and walked out to the road in front of the house. Several witnesses would later testify that they saw the gunmen casually walk out to the road, reload their guns just in case they needed to do some more shooting, and then start gathering rocks, bottles, and sticks to throw into the yard. Leto argues that a legitimate police officer would have preserved the crime scene for investigation rather than planting evidence to shift blame. The gunmen also dumped spent shell casings into the dirt instead of preserving them as evidence. Children later found and collected the shells. Leto highlights this as further proof that the gunmen were trying to cover their tracks, aware that the physical evidence painted them in a negative light. Following the shooting, Thomas Raleigh and the other gunmen nonchalantly left the scene without calling the police or seeking medical help for the injured. After walking some distance, they realized the need to address the situation and returned to the boarding house, still posing as law enforcement. Without notifying a sheriff or doctor, they entered the house with guns drawn, demanding the boarders hand over any weapons. Despite the boarders' insistence that no weapons were present, Raleigh and his men conducted a thorough search, tearing the house apart. They found no weapons. As the gunmen ransacked the boarding house, neighbors began arriving to assist the victims. This development alarmed the gunmen, as the witnesses threatened to expose the truth of the incident. Peter Klobacher, a neighbor, later testified that Cooper, one of the gunmen, chased him out of the house after he came downstairs from checking on the wounded and dying. After failing to find any weapons, Raleigh stepped outside into the front yard, attempting to control the situation. He shooed away onlookers, threatening at least one witness by pointing his gun and warning, "You better leave unless you want me to shoot you too." Leto underscores that these actions, planting evidence, intimidating witnesses, and failing to preserve the scene or seek medical attention, were driven by the gunmen's awareness that the evidence and witnesses worked against them, casting their actions in a damning light. The next morning, after Ivan Stymak returned to the Putrich boarding house, he was arrested by Harry James and taken to the hospital. During the altercation in the yard the previous day, Ivan Kalin had been struck in the head several times with a billy club, leaving him disoriented. Despite his injuries, Kalin managed to escape into the boarding house, where he found himself caught in the crossfire as strikebreakers and guards fired from inside and outside the building. Once the gunfire subsided, Kalin stepped outside and witnessed the nearly lifeless Stephen Putrich being carried away. Some of the attackers recognized Kalin as one of their targets and immediately seized him. Since they lacked a warrant and were not law enforcement officers, the strikebreakers took Kalin to the mining company office and ordered him to wait while they decided what to do. According to Stephen Leto, when the men took Kalin into custody, he was not being arrested. He was being kidnapped. The strikebreakers dragged Kalin into the mine office, assuming that they could then get him handed over to a friendly law enforcement officer with the help of mine managers. While Kalen sat in the office waiting to see where he would be dragged next, a deputy came by and spit on him. After about an hour and a half, Kalen was transported to Houghton in an attempt to have him formally arrested. No effort was made to address his injuries, despite the repeated blows to his head with clubs and fists. The following day, Trammer boss Humphrey Quick filed a formal complaint, leading to warrants being issued for the arrest of Kalen and Stymack. However, the warrants were issued only after Kalen had already been taken into custody. It remains unclear whether Stymack's warrant was issued before or after he was detained, but in either case, the arrest of both men were described as highly irregular and likely illegal. Houghton County Prosecutor Anthony Lucas visited the Putridge boarding house, observing the aftermath of the violent incident. He immediately classified the shootings as murders and called the sheriff, James A. Cruz, to arrest the 6 men responsible for the assault on Kalen and Stymack. Sheriff Cruz, however, refused to comply and instead arrested Kalen. Adding to the injustice, the very men Lucas sought to arrest for the shootings were used as key witnesses against Kalen. The arrest warrants for Kalen and Stymack were officially dated August 15, 1913, but the timeline of events remains ambiguous. Stymack, who had sustained a gunshot wound, was taken to the hospital by Harry James for medical treatment during this period, though the circumstances surrounding his detention were equally irregular. On Saturday, August 15th, a hearing was held where officials questioned members of the Putridge household, including Joseph Putridge, Albert Tejan, Josephine Grubtick, Ivan Kalen's 18-year-old son Slav, 3 unnamed neighbors, and the strikebreakers, Quick, Cooper, Raleigh, James, and Polkington Horn. Judge Alfred J. Murphy, Houghton County Sheriff James A. Cruz, and Houghton County Prosecutor Anthony Lucas launched independent investigations into the massacre. After visiting the scene and interviewing witnesses, Lucas declared the shooting a senseless and unjustifiable act of murder. He demanded that Cruz strip the 2 deputies and 4 Waddell agents of their authority and arrest them. Describing the incident as a shameful affair that was entirely uncalled for, Lucas urged accountability. However, Cruz questioned Lucas's jurisdiction and stated he would seek legal counsel before acting on the request. On Sunday, August 16th, at 11 a.m., a special funeral train departed from the Copper Range Depot in Painesdale, picking up mourners and stopping in South Range, Atlantic Mine, Houghton, Hancock, Dollar Bay, Hubble, and Lake Linden. Upon reaching Red Jacket, the passengers joined thousands of others in the procession to honor the fallen. The gathering began at the Palestra in the early afternoon before proceeding to a funeral service led by Father Meaden at the Croatian Roman Catholic Church of St. John the Baptist. The Finnish Hamu band led the procession to Lakeview Cemetery, 2 miles away, as participants carried evergreen boughs, wreaths, and bouquets of wildflowers. The solemn funeral became a powerful demonstration of unity among the strikers, with approximately 5,000 participants. After the religious ceremonies, strike leaders delivered impassioned speeches at the graveside. Joseph Cannon, a prominent WFM organizer, condemned the killings as retaliation for the workers' efforts to bargain collectively. Cannon accused Governor Woodbridge N. Ferris of being complicit in the violence, labeling him an accessory before the fact of this lamentable double murder. He denounced Sheriff Cruz, stating, "His hands dripped with blood," and criticized the corporation-controlled press for spreading falsehoods to justify the killings. Unfortunately, there isn't any more information on Kalen or Stymack.